My family planned a surprise intervention to tell me I was too selfish and needed to contribute more. I'd been paying rent, groceries, and utilities for 2 years. When I walked in, they all started shouting at once. So I just smiled, set down my keys and phone, and said, "You're right. I'll start contributing." 0. Then I walked out and never came back. 3 weeks later, the eviction notice arrived. I, 32 walked into what I thought was going to be a regular Tuesday evening, and instead found myself in the middle of an ambush that would permanently reshape every relationship I had. The apartment was packed when I opened the door. My parents sat on the couch like judges at a tribunal. My older brother leaned against the kitchen counter with his arms crossed, wearing that smug expression he'd perfected over the years. My sister perched on the armrest beside Mom, and even my uncle, who I hadn't seen in months, stood by the window like some kind of enforcer. The air felt thick and hostile, and I knew immediately that something was very wrong. Before I could even ask what was happening, my brother launched into me. He told me it was time we had a serious talk about my attitude and my complete lack of consideration for the family. My sister jumped in next, saying I'd been living there like I owned the place without any regard for anyone else's needs. Mom added that I'd become selfish and distant, and Dad just sat there nodding along like a bobblehead, occasionally muttering that they'd all agreed this conversation was necessary. I stood there in the doorway, grocery bags still in my hands, trying to process what I was hearing. They called it an intervention. They said they'd been planning it for weeks because they couldn't take my behavior anymore. My uncle chimed in that I needed to grow up and start contributing like an adult instead of coasting on the family's generosity. The absurdity of it hit me like a freight train. For 2 years, 2 entire years, I'd been paying the rent on this 3-bedroom apartment. Not splitting it. Not contributing my share. Paying all of it. Every single month, $1,400 went from my account to the landlord. I'd also been covering groceries for the household, which ran another $400 to $500 monthly, because my brother ate like he was training for a competitive eating contest, and my sister had suddenly gone organic only. The utilities were in my name. Internet, electricity, water, gas, all of it. I paid every bill. And now they were staging an intervention about my selfishness. I set the grocery bags down on the floor slowly, carefully, buying myself a moment to think. My brother kept going, listing all the ways I'd apparently failed the family. I didn't help enough with chores. I didn't spend enough quality time with everyone. I didn't offer to pay for Mom's birthday dinner last month. The list went on, each accusation more disconnected from reality than the last. Something in me shifted. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something colder, more calculated. I'd been supporting 4 other adults while working 50-hour weeks at a job that left me exhausted. I'd been doing it quietly, without complaint, because I thought I was helping my family get back on their feet after Dad's business failed. My brother had been between jobs for 8 months. My sister was allegedly saving money for school, but seemed to spend most of it on clothes and brunch. My parents had moved in temporarily after losing their house, and that temporary arrangement had stretched into infinity. The shouting continued. My sister said I needed to start acting like I cared about the family unit. My uncle said young people today didn't understand sacrifice. My mother looked at me with disappointment and said she'd raised me better than this. I pulled out my phone and my keys from my pocket. The weight of them felt significant somehow, like I was holding the last threads connecting me to these people. I placed both items on the small table by the door. The movement made everyone pause. The apartment went quiet for the first time since I'd walked in. Then I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile or a bitter one. It was just the smile of someone who'd finally understood exactly what needed to happen next. I told them they were absolutely right. I had been selfish. I hadn't been contributing enough to this family. So I was going to fix that immediately. Starting right now, my contribution would be exactly $0.00. I'd be contributing nothing at all because I wouldn't be living there anymore. I thanked them for helping me see things clearly. The confusion on their faces was almost comical. My brother asked what I meant. My sister told me not to be dramatic. Dad said we needed to talk this through like adults. I walked toward the door. My mother stood up and asked where I thought I was going. I told her I was going anywhere that wasn't there. My uncle stepped forward and said I couldn't just leave over one conversation, that I was proving their point about being immature. I told him he was welcome to his opinion, but that I was done being treated like a freeloader in an apartment I paid for while supporting four grown adults who apparently thought I wasn't doing enough. That's when the panic started to set in for them. My brother suddenly wanted to know what I meant about paying for the apartment. My sister said I'd never mentioned paying rent. I asked her how she thought the landlord got paid every month. Did she think the rent fairy delivered cash? My mother insisted that I told them I wanted to help out, that this was my choice. I agreed. It had been my choice, and now I was making a different choice. I left my keys and phone on that table and walked out. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't grab my laptop or any personal items. I just left with the clothes on my back and my wallet in my pocket. I could hear them calling after me in the hallway, their voices echoing off the walls, but I didn't turn around. I'd been smart enough to keep one thing they didn't know about, a savings account at a different bank, one I'd opened years ago and had been quietly adding to whenever I could. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to get a hotel room and figure out my next steps. I'd also kept my car title in my name alone, so the 10-year-old sedan in the parking garage was still mine to take. That first night in the hotel room felt surreal. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence wash over me. No one was demanding I pick up takeout on my way home. No one was asking me to look at something on their laptop or help move furniture or explain why the Wi-Fi was slow. It was just quiet, peaceful. And underneath that peace was a growing sense of certainty that I'd done exactly the right thing. The calls and messages started within hours, but since I'd left my phone behind, I didn't see any of them. I bought a cheap prepaid phone the next morning just for work contacts and gave the number to exactly 3 people: my boss, my work partner, and my one friend who'd been telling me for months that my family was taking advantage of me. He picked up on the second ring, and when I told him what happened, he just said it was about damn time. I crashed on his couch for a few days while I looked for a new place. The first thing I did was call the landlord. I explained that I was moving out and would not be renewing the lease, which was conveniently up for renewal in 30 days. I asked him who'd been paying the rent for the past 2 years. He confirmed it had been me, every month, never late. I told him that would be ending and that the other occupants would need to make their own arrangements. He was surprisingly understanding. He mentioned that he'd actually thought I lived there alone for the first year because I was the only name on the lease and the only person he'd ever dealt with. When my family moved in, I'd asked him if it was okay to have additional occupants, and he'd agreed as long as the rent stayed current. He said he'd send the renewal paperwork to the address on file and wished me luck. I didn't contact my family. I didn't explain myself further. I just moved forward with my life like they were strangers, because in many ways, that's what they'd shown themselves to be. Finding a studio apartment took less than a week. It was smaller than my old bedroom had been, but it was mine. All mine. The rent was $600 a month, less than half what I'd been paying. And the place was in a quiet building with normal neighbors who didn't expect me to bankroll their lives. I worked my job, cooked my own meals, and started sleeping better than I had in years. 3 weeks after I walked out, my friend showed me a message he'd received from my brother. Apparently, they'd been trying to reach me through anyone who might know where I was. The message was frantic. It said the landlord had served them with an eviction notice. They had 30 days to pay the back rent and sign a new lease or vacate the property. My brother wanted to know if I could help them figure out what to do. My friend asked me if I wanted to respond. I told him no. He smiled and deleted the message. What they didn't understand, what they'd apparently never bothered to understand, was that the apartment had always been mine. I'd found it, signed the lease, set up all the utilities. When they needed a place to stay, I'd let them move in without ever discussing finances because I assumed we were family and family helped each other. I'd paid for everything because I could, and because I thought I was giving them time to recover and rebuild. My brother was supposed to be job hunting. My sister was supposedly preparing for school. My parents were meant to be getting back on their feet. Instead, they'd gotten comfortable. They'd started treating my support like an entitlement rather than a gift. And somewhere along the way, they'd convinced themselves that I was the problem, that I wasn't doing enough, that I owed them more. The eviction notice wasn't my doing. It was the natural consequence of them not paying rent on an apartment they didn't have a lease for. When I stopped paying, they had 30 days to figure it out. They'd apparently spent those 30 days trying to find me instead of talking to the landlord or, I don't know, getting jobs. Update 1. It's been 2 months since I walked out, and my life has changed in ways I couldn't have predicted. The studio apartment stopped feeling temporary and started feeling like home. I bought actual furniture. Nothing fancy, Just a decent couch and a bed frame and a small dining table. I started cooking properly again instead of grabbing fast food on my way to an apartment full of people who'd expect me to share. I even adopted a cat from the local shelter, a grumpy orange tabby who hates everyone except me. Work noticed the change too. My boss pulled me aside last week and said I seemed more focused, more present. She wasn't wrong. I'd been running on fumes for 2 years, exhausted from supporting 5 people on one salary while trying to maintain my career. Now I was sleeping 8 hours a night, showing up early, and actually volunteering for projects I found interesting. I got a small raise and a hint that a promotion might be coming if I kept up the good work. My friend updated me on the family situation. He was still in a group chat with my brother from their college days, and apparently my brother hadn't learned when to stop oversharing. The eviction had gone through. They'd scrambled at the last minute to find someone, anyone, who would rent to 4 adults with spotty employment history and no references. They'd ended up in a 2-bedroom place about 40 minutes outside the city. The rent was cheaper, but it was split between my brother and my sister now, and they were apparently both working retail jobs to make ends meet. My parents had moved in with my uncle, which I found darkly amusing given that he'd been so vocal during the intervention about my lack of contribution. I wondered how he was enjoying housing 2 more adults on his dime. My sister tried to reach me through social media. She created a new account and sent me a message that was half apology, half plea for help. She said things had been really hard since I left. They hadn't realized how much I was paying for. She said Mom was depressed and Dad's health was getting worse from the stress. She mentioned that my brother had to sell his gaming setup and that she'd had to drop out of her classes. She said they understood now that they'd made a mistake. She asked if we could talk. I read the message 3 times, waiting to feel something. Guilt, maybe, or sympathy, or even anger. But all I felt was tired. Tired of being treated like an ATM machine with emotions that didn't matter. Tired of being the responsible one while everyone else coasted. Tired of being blamed for being selfish when I'd sacrificed years of my own financial stability for people who couldn't even say thank you. I didn't respond to my sister. I just blocked the account and went back to my life. But the message did make me think about something I'd been avoiding. I'd left behind a lot of my stuff when I walked out: clothes, books, my decent laptop, personal documents. I'd been putting off dealing with it because I didn't want the confrontation, but I also didn't want to just abandon things I'd worked hard to buy. I contacted the landlord again and asked if the property had been cleared out yet. He said yes. The family had moved out a week ago, but they'd left behind several boxes of items. He'd been planning to dispose of them if no one claimed them soon. I arranged to meet him at the old apartment the following Saturday. The place looked different when I walked in. Smaller, somehow. Emptier. The landlord had already had it cleaned for the next tenants, but you could still see the wear and tear from 5 people living in a space meant for 2. There were scuff marks on the walls where my brother had moved furniture around constantly. The kitchen counter had a permanent stain where my sister had spilled nail polish and never cleaned it properly. My boxes were in the bedroom that used to be mine. Someone had packed my things, though not carefully. Clothes were shoved in haphazardly. Books were stacked without any organization, and my laptop was just thrown on top without any protection. I was amazed it still worked when I checked it later. There was also a note, sitting on top of one of the boxes. My mother's handwriting. It said they were sorry for how things had ended. It said they hoped I was safe. It said they loved me and wanted to work things out if I was willing. The note didn't say anything about understanding what they'd done wrong. It didn't acknowledge the 2 years of financial support or the intervention where they'd attacked me for not doing enough. It was just a vague, generic apology that asked for forgiveness without taking any real responsibility. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. Then I loaded my boxes into my car, thanked the landlord, and drove back to my studio apartment. I threw the note away before I even unpacked. Update 2. 6 months have passed since the intervention. Half a year of living on my own terms, paying my own bills, making my own choices. The difference in my mental health has been staggering. I didn't realize how much anxiety I'd been carrying until it was gone. My friend jokes that I'm like a different person, more confident, more relaxed, more willing to take risks and try new things. The promotion came through at work. I'm managing a small team now, which comes with more responsibility, but also significantly more money. For the first time in my adult life, I'm building actual savings instead of watching my paycheck evaporate into someone else's rent and groceries. I started contributing to a retirement account. I'm planning a vacation, an actual vacation where I leave the city and don't tell anyone where I'm going. My family has continued their attempts to reach me, though less frequently now. My brother sent a friend request from a new profile. Deleted. My father apparently got my work email somehow and sent a message saying we should talk. I marked it as spam. My mother tried calling my office line, but I told the receptionist I wasn't available and to please not transfer calls from that number again. The only one I haven't heard from directly is my uncle, which tracks. He'd never been that close to me anyway. He was just there that night to pile on, because apparently that's what family does. What's interesting is that I've started hearing things through the grapevine. The friend who'd been keeping me loosely updated mentioned that my brother had been talking about how I'd abandoned the family. He was telling people I'd left them high and dry, that I'd walked out over a minor disagreement and cut them off completely. He was positioning himself as the victim, and apparently some extended family members were buying it. I thought about correcting the record. I thought about laying out exactly what had happened. The 2 years of financial support, the intervention where they'd called me selfish, the fact that I'd paid every bill while they contributed nothing. But then I realized something. I didn't care what they thought. The people who mattered to me knew the truth. Everyone else could believe whatever story made them comfortable. There was one loose end that had been bothering me, though. I'd received a notice in the mail that some of my documents, tax returns specifically, had been requested by someone claiming to be me. The request had been denied because the signatures didn't match, but it raised red flags. I called the tax office and added additional security to my accounts. Then I pulled my credit report. Someone had tried to open a credit card in my name. The application had been rejected because I had a credit freeze in place, something I'd done years ago after a data breach at a retailer. But the attempt was there, dated about 3 months after I'd left. The address on the application was my old apartment. I filed a police report. I didn't know which family member had tried it, but I also didn't care. Identity theft was identity theft, family or not. The detective I spoke with said it was unlikely they'd pursue charges if I couldn't prove who did it, but having the report on file would protect me if they tried again. That was the moment I stopped feeling any residual guilt about walking away. They hadn't just taken advantage of my financial support. They'd literally tried to steal my identity to keep their lifestyle going. Whatever family bonds had existed were completely severed. My new life continued to improve. I started dating someone I met through work, another manager in a different department. It was casual at first, just coffee and conversation, but it evolved into something real. She knew about my family situation because I was honest about it from the start, and her response was refreshingly straightforward. She said anyone who'd stage an intervention to call me selfish while I was supporting them financially wasn't worth my time or energy. She got it without me having to explain or justify my choices. 8 months after leaving, I got a text from an unknown number. It said it was my sister using a friend's phone. She said Dad had been in the hospital with a heart issue and that I should know. She said the family wanted me there, but would understand if I didn't come. She gave me the hospital name and room number. I sat with that message for a long time. Part of me, the part that remembered being a kid and having a father who taught me to ride a bike and helped with homework, wanted to go. But the larger part, the part that had grown and healed over the past 8 months, knew that going back would undo all the progress I'd made. I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't respond to the text. I simply let it sit there, unanswered, because I'd learned that not every message deserved a response. If Dad's health was serious, I felt bad about that on a human level. But I also knew that showing up would open a door I'd worked very hard to close, and whatever happened next, I wouldn't sacrifice my peace for people who'd shown me exactly who they were when times got tough. My girlfriend asked if I was okay after I told her about the message. I said I was, and I meant it. She held my hand and said she was proud of me for setting boundaries, even when they were hard. Update 3. It's been over a year now. 14 months since I walked out of that intervention and never looked back. My life is unrecognizable from what it was, and I mean that in the best possible way. The promotion led to another opportunity, a lateral move to a different division that came with a significant pay increase and better work-life balance. I took it. I'm now making almost double what I was earning back when I was supporting 5 people, and every penny of it goes toward my own life and my own future. I upgraded from the studio to a 1-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood. I bought a newer car. I'm investing in myself in ways I never could before. My relationship got serious. We moved in together about 2 months ago, and it's the healthiest living situation I've ever experienced. We split everything 50-50. We communicate openly about finances, and neither of us takes the other for granted. She's met my friend, the one who helped me through the initial aftermath, and they get along great. I've met her family, who are warm and functional and treat me like I matter. It's been healing to see what normal family relationships can look like. I haven't heard from my biological family in months. The attempts to contact me stopped sometime around the 1-year mark. I don't know if they finally gave up or if they just ran out of ways to reach me. Either way, the silence has been a gift. My girlfriend asked me recently if I thought I'd ever reconcile with them. I told her I didn't think so. She asked if that made me sad. I said no, it made me free. Here's what I learned from all of this. You can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. I spent 2 years pouring money and energy into people who not only didn't appreciate it, but actively resented me for not giving more. They saw my help as an entitlement, not a gift, and when I set a boundary, the most basic boundary of not accepting abuse, they couldn't handle it. Walking away wasn't cruel. Letting them face the natural consequences of their choices wasn't abandonment. It was simply me choosing to save myself instead of drowning with them. Sometimes I think about that night, standing in the doorway with grocery bags in my hands while 5 people yelled at me for being selfish. I think about how close I came to just apologizing, to smoothing things over and continuing the cycle. And I'm grateful, genuinely grateful, that something in me chose differently. The eviction notice that arrived 3 weeks after I left wasn't revenge. It was reality finally catching up to people who'd been insulated from it by my wallet. I didn't cause their problems. I just stopped solving them. And you know what? I'd do it all exactly the same if I had to choose again. My only regret is that I didn't walk away sooner. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too.